Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Drew Corkill, a graphic designer and game designer of Small Time Heroes, a cooperative deck builder for 1 to 2 players, which is currently on GameFound. Drew, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Hey James, doing great. Really excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you on here. We were just talking off air really quickly about just how quickly this thing is funding, which is awesome. And I always love to see that kind of success. Having done Kickstarter campaigns myself, that is always the nail biter out of the gate to see if, geez, is this thing going to actually fund or not? Or are we going to fund in day one, which is kind of the Goldilocks thing everyone goes for. So congrats on that. Before we get into Small Time Heroes, I want to start back with kind of how you got into this industry. I know you do like graphic design, UX, UI. Was this always part of the board game industry, or were you doing this as part of another industry before you got into this, or where did that kind of play out?
Yeah, so I went to school for graphic design. I have my bachelor's in graphic design, and I actually have a master's in essentially user experience design.
Wow.
And so I started, my career is in UI UX work in like the tech industry. And so I do user interface and user experience design for apps and websites. And board games kind of came about because it was actually I got interested in designing a game, and I reached out to Gabe Barrett from the Board Game Design Lab podcast asking if he wanted any free graphic design work, and he said sure. And then when he actually realized I was good, he said, I want to pay you for this. And so kind of started with him, and me and him have become great friends, and he's sort of the main person who's gotten me into the industry. I've done most of his games for him.
Oh, that's amazing. Were you like a board gamer like before that? Like were you heavily into the hobby industry in terms of just playing games before you kind of got into the designing side, or?
Uh, to an extent, yes. I was definitely more of a video gamer. I played Hearthstone semi-competitively,
Yeah.
where I would go to tournaments and, um, potentially win prizes. I almost made it to the BlizzCon, whatever the big BlizzCon event is in Hearthstone. I made it to the pre-qualifiers for that. But then it became too addictive, and I decided to stop playing Hearthstone. And I kind of was looking for something that would replace that, and I found board games, hoping that my wife would want to play board games with me. That has not gone that well, but it did get me into the hobby. And so, yeah, I kind of started with Carcassonne and Settlers of Catan and stuff from there, and then eventually continued playing and, of course, buying games until I have too many.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say about board games is it's more of a contained experience, right? And I love video games, right? And most recently, I was playing No Man's Sky, and this is a title that's been around for like 10 years, but they keep adding, and I've just recently got into it, but they keep adding these different missions and things. You can unlock different ships and things like that to this game, so they constantly are updating it. And I was playing for it was like 3 days straight. I was playing, trying to like unlock this ship. And then one night, I just went to bed that night after playing for like 4 hours. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is insane. I should be taking that time and putting it into either designing a game or, my endless list of projects. It is amazing how much video gaming can really kind of pull you in, but then almost you can almost become a slave to the time investment in that. And for me, that's why I've really pivoted more later in life towards board games, because I find it's more of a contained experience, right? So I go for a game night, socialize, you're talking with people, and yes, you can talk with people online, of course, but like face to face means something to me. And after your 3, 4, 5 hours, you're done for the week, right? And then you go home and you get on to other things. It's not like you've got that thing you got to kind of finish. So it's kind of cool when I talk to people that have come from the video game industry. Many of them see board games as a tangible, tactile kind of escape from being in front of their screen. Did you experience that at all from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially doing UI UX work, I'm on the screen all day long, and so to
Yeah.
go home and get back on the computer is not great. And so yeah, I've found that playing board games is just a really nice way to get off of the screen and interact with people in a tangible way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then what was that conversation like with Gabe when you approached him? Was it just one of these things where just serendipitously it worked out he was looking for someone and you happened to have the skill level? Or was it like an interview process? Was he a buddy of yours before that? Like how did you guys kind of connect?
Yeah, I literally just sent him a cold email. I said, "Hey,
Wow.
I like your podcast. I know you're working on some games, and do you want any help? I'll do it for free." And he said, "Yeah, sure. I have this one game I'm working on, and let's see what you can do." And it was just a prototype, and it never even got published. It just kind of probably went into the trash at some point. But I did some work for him, and he said, "Wow, you're actually good at this, and I should probably start paying you now." And so he gave me my first kind of little job, just a tiny little thing, and did great on that. And then when he decided to crowdfund his first game, he asked me to be the graphic designer for him.
That's amazing.
And yeah, just a long relationship after that. That is, I've just been working on his games and helping him out with pretty much everything he needs.
I think many would probably be shocked to realize how common this is, this type of a story, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations with people in the past saying, I really want to get into the industry. How best do I get into the industry? And I say, just reach out to people in the industry. Say, hey, I'd like to get involved, and it could be anything from helping with play testing to, in your case, hey, I have some design skills that I think I can help out here. Most companies will probably accept free help, and if the relationship is good, and you kind of establish a shorthand between each other, most are also willing to kind of reward going forward, saying, okay, you kind of helped us at the beginning. Now as things get bigger, if you want to be part of the larger journey, we can kind of pull you in, and there's obviously revenue and things to share there. I think the challenge becomes is when people try to get in and they set a very high price out of the gate, and they haven't really established, which is fine. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be paid what they're worth. But kind of establishing yourself in the industry in terms of working on game design, I think you need to have some, evidence of things you've done in this industry specifically, I think, in order for people to, want to take a chance on you. And, one way to do that is through volunteering, right? So, and even at conventions, quite frankly, I've talked to, I don't know how many publishers have said where they are always looking for people to help in conventions. So usually you can even get a ticket, right? So they might not be able to pay you large funds, or maybe they can pay you kind of like a minimum wage, for the 3 days. But at the very least, you can get free admission. And some of these conventions are not cheap, right? And that free admission might give you backstage access to other, get to meet other people in the industry through networking and so forth. So, there's so many ways you can kind of leverage that if you have the desire, right? So good for you on that. That's awesome that's worked out for you. And then you worked on this. I know he's kind of built out this kind of game of the month model. Can you talk a little bit about that for people that don't understand what that is?
Sure. Yeah. It's we started this, I guess, in January, so it's almost been an entire year, and it's the solo game of the month series or club. I guess it's not technically a club, but yeah, Gabe came to me one day and he said, "Hey, I have an idea. I found these VHS boxes, and I think they're going to be perfect for games. They need to be small games, and me and him tend to like solo games a lot, and especially Gabe has been designing solo games for most of the work he's done. And so he said, what if we took the Button Shy model and released one game every month, one solo game every month? They'll be small box. They'll fit into these little VHS cases, which is actually really cool. As a product, I thought the VHS cases were awesome. It gives us like a brand identity. It gives us constraints to work within. And they look really cool on the shelf when they're all lined up in a row.
Yeah.
And so I said, yeah, let's do it. This sounds like a great idea. And he did a lot. He talked to Jason Tagmeyer from Button Shy, pulling from that model just a little bit. And I think one of the great things about it is once you start getting traction, you build a community around these things. And it almost doesn't even matter what the game is. People just want to back it because it's part of the series and they want to have all of them. And one of the other crucial pieces of this was shipping from China.
Yeah.
And so basically the way these campaigns are set up is they're one and dones. And so we run a campaign, we print a couple hundred over uh, the number of backers. They get shipped directly from China, so it's cheap. There's no bringing them to a warehouse, no storing them, um, no container shipping. And so it allows it to be cheap. It's relatively fast once it gets done. And the VHS boxes, because of their size, keep weight down and keep shipping costs down.
Yeah.
And so kind of all of these things came together to make this thing work. And it's been going great.
That's cool. How many titles has he done now?
So Small Time Heroes will be the 12th.
12th.
So this will be the
Wow.
12th one. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. I gotta imagine, and good for him on this, because the amount of planning that's involved to set something like this up, right? Because you're not. He's likely working on at least six games out, I would think, right? Because you have to everything from getting the art, the play time, play testers, getting everything lined up while you're working on the current campaign, while you're fulfilling the next one. Like you constantly have this staggered effect happening, right? That
Oh yeah.
it takes a lot of time management and making sure that you have amazing organizational skills. So kudos to you guys on that. For this one here, Small Time Heroes, how did you come up with this idea of this game? So this is your actual design. So I know you've done UX, UI for the team, for Gabe, but for this game, this was actually your game. So where did you come up with this idea, and how long did it take you kind of put together?
Yeah. So this was kind of one of the first game designs I did. When I started, I maybe had one or two other ones that I worked on. They were okay and threw them away. And then this one really just felt good. And so it was probably about, geez, 3 or 4 years ago now that I started on this.
Yeah.
I do work full time, and so this is sort of my hobby. And I just really enjoyed the video game Slay the Spire, and I wanted that experience to be on the tabletop. And every time that I played a deck builder, I was always hoping for the thing that I wanted, and I never was able to find the deck builder that I thought I would love. Coming from Hearthstone, I was really into like building decks and making cool combos and just like really into card play. And I found that most of the deck builders, they're all based around your currency that's in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
and then using that currency to buy cards to make your deck better. But then you have a bunch of money cards in your hand that don't do anything at the end of the game. And so they all feel like a little more kind of Euro-y than I wanted them to be.
Mm.
And what I found with Slay the Spire in the digital game is it was a deck builder, but it had none of those mechanisms in it. And so I said, I know this will be a good tabletop game if we can simplify down a lot of the stuff the computer is doing. And so a bunch of work was done to kind of figure out how to do that. But yeah, so I just decided to start designing my own version of Slay the Spire. I did the game design course with Justin Gary, who's the designer of Ascension. And through that, we worked on my game with him. He played it a couple times and gave me a lot of feedback on it. And yeah, just slowly worked on it through those years and wanted to get further along with it than I was. And I did run a print and play campaign. I guess it's probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was a print and play only campaign, and I had 200-ish backers maybe on it. But that helped me, gain some money to pay for art and to do stuff. So also sort of established a community, got my game out there, even though it was only in a print and play format. And yeah, it's finally come around, and now it's going to be a real product.
I think print and play is great. It's a way for game designers, especially if they're starting out. You're literally you're delivering a digital file, right? So you don't have to, if you want to dip your toe into the industry and the shipping and things like this scares you, one way to get in without overwhelming yourself is through print and play, right? Your design, everything leading up to when you launch it, are all your costs, but once you launch it, your costs are kind of done, right? You're delivering a digital file. There's a lot of print and players out there that love print and play games, so that's cool, and you're able to generate some revenue and then pump that into artwork, and it's kind of this start small and kind of work your way up. So the total then years that this thing has been going on for is how many years has Small Time Heroes been in development?
I would say 3 or 4. It's
Yeah.
probably 4, but that feels like too long, but I'm pretty sure it's probably been about 4.
That's amazing. And then taking it to the next, so that conversation with Gabe, I imagine, would have been kind of a natural one, right? To say like, look,
Mm.
now they've been doing all this design for you. Do you mind taking a look at my game? Like, I think I got something here that can make it work. And how'd that conversation go?
Yeah, well, first I had to actually give it away to him. Like that was my first decision is I was like I was really set on doing it myself. So like
Yeah.
Gabe and we've had a lot of conversations. I actually pitched him the game before Solo Game of the Month started and he said, "Yeah, it looks great. Let's do it." And I said, "No, actually I want to do it myself." And you know, I started Solo Game of the Month work. So that graphic design work takes up the large amount of my free time that I have. And I realized this game was never going to go anywhere unless I did it with Gabe. And so once I made that decision to kind of give it away, not do it on my own and be a publisher, I just, yeah, I approached him and he said, yeah, we have a slot open and I think your game's great. I wanted to sign it before. And he did a little bit of play testing on it. He came up with actually one of the main mechanisms of it or helped me figure out
Hmm.
one of the main mechanisms of it. And so he's like, let's do it. And then we just had to figure out how to put it into the VHS case model.
Mm.
And so once we kind of worked through logistics of that, yeah, we just pushed go and we most of the stuff was already ready for it because I was essentially ready to run my own Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah. That's got to be a tough decision, right? Like to decide, like, do I do it myself because you get a larger piece of the pie,
Yeah,
but you take a larger chunk of the work, right? So,
yeah,
and trying to build an audience versus leveraging an existing audience, right? Like that,
yeah.
that there's meaning to that, and I don't think people often appreciate how much work is involved in building an audience, right? And if you can tap
Mm,
into an existing audience, that's sometimes the better play, right? I think the
yeah.
Goldilocks zone from a publisher standpoint, from the ones I've talked to, is they still want designers who are intimately involved. They want to be part of the process. They don't want someone that just hands it off and kind of walks away. And so it sounds like you've been kind of intimately involved as well, which I think is kind of cool
Oh
to
yeah.
kind of see this baby kind of get to the end. So for those who don't even know about Small Time Heroes, maybe you can describe it. I'm showing it on screen for those that are watching live. First of all, this is I can't understate this. This is day one. Like you're a few hours in, you guys are already at almost $19,000. I'm putting this in Canadian because that's the only way I can see it on a goal of 5,000. This thing's crushing it, and you still got 16 days to go. And literally, you're only a few hours in. Man,
Mhm.
good for you guys. Congrats on that. Walk us through, how do you play this kind of small time heroes? What's the gist of playing this game?
Yeah, so it's actually fairly simple to play. I would say the complexity of it comes from what's on the cards. And so
Mm,
essentially what you're doing is it's a deck builder. And so you start out with a starting deck that has cards that are okay, but not great. And throughout the course of the game, you're adding cards to your deck to make it better. You have a hero row, which has four of your cards. There's a giant deck of 64 unique cards that will can be put into your deck. And what you'll be doing is you will draw a hand of five cards. You pay three energy, and then you play your cards out, and you deal damage or gain block. And the minion side of it, or the enemy side of it, is there's a row of three enemies at the top, and then they have these health trackers below them that have some symbols on them. Those
mm,
symbols relate to a what I'm calling the intent deck. And the intent deck is a deck of 20 cards that contain all of those symbols on them, plus two additional ones. And they have various distribution of them. So squares and circles will deal, you'll have more squares and circles than you will circles and diamonds,
mm,
than you will the vertical and horizontal lines. Um, and each on the back of the card, there's one or two symbols. If it's one symbol, you know exactly what it's going to be. So if there's a square on the front, there will be a square on the back. But there's some cards that have a square and a circle on the back of the or on the front of the card. And so you know it will either be a square or a circle ability that happens, but you don't know which one. So you kind of have to look and see what's going to happen. And then you have to kind of hedge your bet on what's going to be the best play based on what might come out of that deck. Obviously, because it's a deck of cards, you might say, well, I know I've seen a bunch of squares, so the circle is probably going to be the one, and then kind of go a little more towards planning for the circle attack. Yeah, so you'll just be dealing damage to minions. Once you defeat waves, you gain rewards. Like I said, there's no currency cards in the game. And so all you need to do is you pick up your reward card. It tells you how many cards to add to your deck. Maybe you remove some cards, maybe you gain some potions, and you just put those cards into your deck and you shuffle it up, and then you set up a new wave of minions, and you go until you fight a final boss. And if you beat him, you win the game. If you don't, you lose.
That's cool. And it's good value too. It looks like when I was just scrolling on the page there that it's like I think $24 for a pledge, like a base pledge of the game. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so all the solo game of the month games are always $24 at least currently. And the thing we had to do with this game was it was too big. And so but also what's great about this game is it's very modular. You can play any hero with any boss. And so what we did is we separated the game into two boxes. So each box comes with one hero and two bosses. And so we have the warrior box for sale and the rogue box for sale, or you can bundle them together and save, I think it's $5. It's 40 bucks for the two box bundle. And you can play them and mix up the content. You just choose whichever hero you want, whichever boss you want, and then mash them together. It also, if you buy both of the boxes, it allows you to play 2-player. So because this is solo game of the month, it is a solo focused game, but I did develop it to be a 2-player game, potentially 3. That's a little iffy if it can get to 3. But yeah, 1 to 2 player was kind of the main player count I was going for before it became solo game of the month.
So what's the longer term play on that? Like for that title, is it like, do you see yourself doing more bosses and more heroes? Like, so is there going to be more iterations of this game? And then how does that fit into the game of the month? Because you guys are doing a limited run and then you're done. So if somebody wants to jump into this, say next year, if you guys come with like another wave of this game, is it a reprint plus new bosses, or how have you guys kind of mapped that out?
Yeah, so there's definitely going to be more games. Well, assuming that it's successful, which we've seen that it has been.
Yeah.
We'll. I already have one hero designed. We'll need to be adding 2 more bosses to that box. That one will be coming at some point. And the way I designed the game was I really wanted it to be kind of like an LCG model, so Marvel Champions or to a lesser extent, Arkham Horror and things like that. And so it was designed to be extremely expandable. The base system is very simple, and there's a lot of things you can do around that to kind of create a unique experience with whichever hero you're playing or boss you're fighting. And so as far as how it fits into the solo game of the month model is, we've talked about it a little. Either we've started doing add-ons to other campaigns, so we'll do a new game with an add-on, and sometimes those will be reprints. So Dyson Crusoe was one of the games that became popular, and people really wanted it and couldn't get it, so we just put it on an add-on to an existing campaign, and then people could pledge. So we could just put on the new hero as an add-on, or we could do a campaign just for that with the rogue and warrior as additional pledges, or maybe there's even a 3-box bundle or something. Not quite sure. We haven't worked that out fully, but so it'll either be its own campaign or it will be an add-on to an existing one. Yeah,
I could see that'd be kind of cool, like down the road, like seeing the series of boxes, right? So your small time heroes having like almost like a little box set where you've got your little DVDs there and you've got 4, 5, 6 of these things all together on the shelf. How cool that would be, just to kind of pull them out. It's got to be easy for transportation, I'm thinking, as well, right? Going to game night, you can just grab a handful of these games, throw them in your game bag, and away you go.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the downsides to the VHS boxes is the space constraint, and you can't sleeve any of these cards, which a lot of people complain about. I mean, it makes sense for a deck builder. I get it. So if you do want to sleeve them, you do have to put them in a separate box. But even with that LCG model, like, I see people's Marvel Champion collections, and they have these like crazy custom wooden boxes that they've done their own art on. And so I think with this model, like, people are probably okay. Like, if they want to ditch the box and sleeve it, they might be willing to do that.
You could even do like a GameCraft, because GameCrafter even sells. They have like a marketplace too. So you could even create like a larger box that you just have in the GameCrafter marketplace. If somebody wants to get a larger box for sleeving, they just place their order through there and away they go. And again, you guys are kind of hands off, right? And let them take care of it. But Man,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
yeah, that's crazy. What was one of the key things you learned, like when you took and I sorry to circle back on this, but
Mhm.
when you mentioned this game design course you took before, what were some of the key takeaways you had from that that were really helped you kind of improve your approach to game design?
I think one of the biggest keys that I took away was iteration. And so
Mm,
game design is all about putting out an idea, testing it, and then fixing that idea. And so Justin has this process. He'll be mad. I can't remember the name of what he calls it, but essentially it's an iterative process where you kind of go through the steps and then you start over and go through the steps and start over. And so he kind of taught that to us, and yeah, just knowing that it's okay to fail, you're going to fail,
yeah.
and figuring out what you can learn from those failures to take on to the next iteration. That's definitely like the biggest thing, and I just think a great motto for your life as well, not just in game design.
For me, I find like through the iterative process, it's easier to kind of measure the impact, right? So,
Mhm.
and what I mean for this for people listening is like changing one thing, right? And there's tons of times you'll be, doing a game design session, you have some people play testing, giving you feedback, and like, oh, I should do this, you should do this, you should do this, and they're, you throw like six, seven, eight different ideas at you. And for me, I always want to get the core done first and say, okay, I'm going to do one of those and see how it impacts the game. Okay, now I'll add another one and see how that impacts the game. The challenge is if you do too many things, you don't know. Sometimes the cloud of that it could be broke. It breaks, right? But you don't know what is causing it to break, right? Whereas if you can kind of change one thing as you at a time, then you can say, okay, is this going to work or is it not? And so that's how
Mhm.
I try to approach things as well. Um, it's a rewarding process. It can be tedious, right? And did he talk in there at all about like at what point you just kind of call it and say, all right, we got something viable here. We got to move to the next step or
Yeah, I think it's either when your playtesters start asking if to play the game again, then you kind of know
yeah,
you have something solid. Um, and if you keep getting bad feedback and after every iteration or you're stuck on something, like it's probably time to move on because you've spent a lot of work into it and it's not going anywhere. And but I mean, I think one of the things is like it doesn't mean that that game's going away forever. You just
yeah,
put it on the shelf and maybe you take one of the mechanisms that you had in that game and base a new game around it. I think with Small Time Heroes as a good example, I had this mechanism in it where it was similar to like Aeon's End, where
mm,
you discard into a certain number like order, and then you kind of know how what cards are going to come up.
yeah,
But we realized it was just taking way too much mental energy to like try and think about that instead of getting you into the core of the game.
yeah,
And so I loved, like I had this, I don't even remember what it was, but I had this thing that I was just in love with. I loved what I did. And I never thought that that would go away. And then through playtesting, we were just like, yeah, it's not getting you to the fun of the game. And so cut it and try it without it, and tried it without it, and it worked so much better. Yeah.
yeah. I had a mechanic on Survivors of Venus, which is coming out soon, and it was just we did a couple play tests, and it's like this is way too mathy. Like this is like it's distracting from the fun of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and it leaves things too open for error, right? If you don't count right or if you're not kind of seeing what you have where. So we end up cutting that, like literally just demolishing it and starting again and saying, okay, we know the concept of the game, we know the essence of what we want people to achieve, but how they get there, we have to find a different way. Because this particular way is just not working. It's making the game more complicated than it needs to be. So yeah, it's kind of a cool process, and you learn every time you
Mm-hmm.
do one of these, right? Like the next game you do, you're gonna learn more, and the next game after that, you're gonna learn even more, and hopefully they kind of build on each other. Where are you going from here? So is it like I know that you have the UX UI, and you're also working on solo game of the month with Gabe and helping with like a lot of the graphic design. Do you have plans to keep doing game design? Like what's in it? Kind of what's your plan?
Yeah, I have some games that I've been working on. You know, I don't think I want to be a publisher now that I've decided that, but who knows, maybe one day that'll happen. But yeah, I'm really into the solo space. I love designing solo games.
Yeah.
That's how I play most of my games. Like I said, my wife isn't incredibly happy to play games with me. She will, especially if we have like a group of friends, but
Yeah.
most of my board games are done solo. And when you're designing a game, you have all the play testers you need when you're doing a solo game,
Yeah.
at least in the initial stages. And so, yeah, I have a couple games in the works. Actually, even before Small Time Heroes, I pitched Gabe another game, and we were going to do it instead of Small Time Heroes because I was wanting to keep it for myself.
Yeah.
But when I decided like it wasn't quite ready, and yeah, and then I decided to let Small Time Heroes be solo game of the month, and it's a skateboarding game, and so it started out as like a skateboarding roll and write, and it has then morphed into, obviously because I like cards, a kind of deck building skateboarding game, and so yeah, that was an interesting one because I would say like a lot of games are either theme first or mechanism first. This one actually came out as being UI first. I had this great idea for like the user interface of the board, and I built a game around the user interface. So it was a pretty cool accident that happened, and yeah, I've just been developing that down. It's mostly ready now, and yeah, that's probably the next one I'll be working on and pitching to Gabe is kind of Tony Hawk Pro Skater becomes a board game.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, for those who want to check out this campaign, I am going to put a link in the show notes. It is on GameFound, so this is not Kickstarter, this is GameFound, but I'll encourage people to check it out. It looks super cool. Just in the whole time we've been talking here, you guys are almost at 20 grand. Like it is taken off like a rocket ship, and I know you guys are very pleased with how it's started. I can't wait to see how it finishes. I'll definitely be cheering for you, and we'll get you back on for that next game you end up publishing, my friend.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
No worries, Drew. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.